as we come marching, marching in the beauty of the day. Our million darkened kitchens, our 1,000 mill lofts grey, are touched with all the radiance that the sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses.
I've no doubt that you remember March 2018 when the Beast of the East came ravaging across the country. Well, on International Women's Day, March the 8th, at the height of it, a group of us marched through the town, dressed as suffragettes and waving banners saying votes for women. We did it to commemorate 100 years of some women getting the vote, and we had a lot of fun despite getting very cold and very wet. In the afternoon we had an afternoon tea, and it was then that we heard for the first time the name Elizabeth Wolstenholme Elmy. We discussed it at length and we decided that she deserved some sort of commemoration in the town for helping women get the vote. But we decided to fundraise and get a small plaque somewhere in the town centre that visitors could read and hear what she'd done. But the project grew. The more we learned about Elizabeth, the more we realised that Elizabeth is not just a suffragette, not just a campaigning suffragist, but she is an influential, radical human rights campaigner. And she achieved so much that is so important for our life today, not just as women, but as men as well, because she was working for universal suffrage. We decided that it just had to be a statue. So in the 2 years since then, we've achieved such a lot. We've had lots and lots of fun. We got £10,000 grant from the Heritage Lottery that we've used to make our publicity material. We have used it to set up our heritage trail and to make our website. We have written blogs that are on several websites: Invisible Women, Working People's History Library, Women's Political websites. We've been in the press. We've had a letter in The Guardian. We've had a 3-page spread in Cheshire Life, and we've been in the Chronicle so many times that we've lost count. We've done street stalls. We've been involved with Congleton Pride last year. We have done marches and events in other towns as well, in Macclesfield and in Biddulph, just off the top of my head. We've been on radio, and we've even been on TV when we took part in Celebrity 5 Go Barging. We've done outreach to local schools and local groups, and it just goes on and on. We have had tremendous fun, and we intend to continue until we get our statue. So, what were these amazing things we learned about Elizabeth? Well, when she moved to Congleton in 1867, she was already nationally known. The year before, she had been the first woman to speak before a parliamentary commission, spoken out for the rights of girls to have an education. And this led to the Act being changed and both girls and boys being given an education until the age of 13. Shortly after moving to Congleton, she met her soulmate, Benjamin Elmy. Ben believed as ardently as Elizabeth did in the education of girls. They believed that only via education can women truly be equal. They believed that an educated woman could earn her own money and therefore her own freedom. Not only this, Elizabeth carried on campaigning with Ben at her side and fought ardently for the repeal of the Contagious Diseases Act, which was a particularly nasty piece of legislation that discriminated greatly against women and girls. She won the repeal of that act. She also fought to bring in the Married Women's Property Act, which was a key piece of legislation. This meant that a woman could keep property in her own name, could have her own bank account and money, something that had been denied to women up until that date. She also fought and brought in the Guardianship of Infants Act, which gave a mother rights over her own children. Prior to this, only the father had rights, and if a marriage broke down, it was very common for the man to take the children away and for the mother to never see them again. In 1891, Elizabeth was galvanised into action by the Clitheroe case. This was a high-profile case where a man was holding his wife as a prisoner and demanding his conjugal rights. At that time, the laws of the land said it was not possible for a man to rape his wife. It was his God-given right to have sex with his wife whenever he wanted. This poor woman was being held a prisoner, and Elizabeth went into action. She spoke openly on a public platform about marital rape. It was a shocking thing to do in those days. And when they were successful and they won the case, Elizabeth rejoiced and thought that that was it. That was over and done with. Coverture was gone. It was now not possible for a man to own his wife and to have sex whenever he wanted. Unfortunately, this piece of legislation was not changed until the Sexual Offences Act of 2002, nearly 130 years after Elizabeth had fought the case. That's shocking, I think you'll agree. Elizabeth fought for many, many things through her life. They were always campaigning. Elizabeth and Ben used most of their own monies for these campaigns, and it culminated in the women's right to vote, which is the one that we think of when we think of Elizabeth. Elizabeth fought for 43 years for a woman's right to vote. She set up committees, she battled, she got women into groups, and she just fought and slogged at it. She was there on the night the WSPU was set up with Emmeline Pankhurst. Emmeline, of course, referred to her as the brains behind the suffragette movement. We're talking 1907 here, though, so Elizabeth was 73, 74 years of age, was far too old by that stage to go to prison and be force-fed. But they looked upon Elizabeth as their mother. They gave her a title of Nestor, which means wise woman. Elizabeth was particularly proud of that one. So why has our Elizabeth been so abysmally forgotten? Well, part of it was purposeful. She was written out of the suffragette part of the history because she fell out with them. But I think probably her secularism, that didn't fit well with the society of the time. It wasn't good to be an atheist. The fact that she was part of the free love movement, which meant that she didn't marry. She lived openly with Ben in a civil partnership. That didn't sit well with society. She was looked upon as a sort of fallen woman, if you like. I think as well, had she had grandchildren, if her son Frank had had children, there would have been a line of dissent there, and they would have been shouting for their grandmother, you know, to talk about her and put her back where she should be. And of course that didn't happen, so that was fundamental to it. But also there was political reasons. The suffragettes and the suffragists were mostly either members of the early Labour Party or members of the Liberal Party. Elizabeth refused to be party political. She always said that she would work with anyone that was working for female emancipation. So she shared a platform with Keir Hardie, and she also worked closely with John Stuart Mill, who was a big proponent for women's rights in the late 19th century and was a liberal. And she also worked with the Primrose League, which was a group of conservative women. So Elizabeth had no political allegiance, but she sort of made enemies in each of the parties, if you like. So why did we think it important to have a statue? Well, there's lots of reasons for that. Number one were is that there are so few statues of named women in this country. It's less than 3%. Every town and every village has a statue of some man or other, and we needed to redress that. There is a movement across the UK for women's statues that are being erected. We've had the Pankhurst statue in Manchester, Millicent Fawcett in Parliament Square. We've had the Annie Kenny in Oldham, the Lumberjack Jills and Land Girls in the Arboretum in Staffordshire, and all these will fit together on a trail of female statues across the UK. So it would be nice if Congleton's statue was on that list of things to see. Just before the furore with the statue coming down in Bristol and the Black Lives Matter movement, we made a little film about statues and the need for it. We've got some really good people on there talking about it. We've got a sculptor, we've got some councillors from Manchester, and some hidden women representatives. Go and have a look at it. It's on our Facebook page and it's on our website as well. I think you'll find it very interesting. Going back to our projects that came to a halt when COVID hit, one of them is our heritage trail. We have had made 4 plaques to put on key sites across the town where things happened in Elizabeth's life, where she lived and where her school was and things like that. And our wonderful researcher and trustee, Heather Watson, has done an amazing piece of work. She's been researching locally places where Ben and Elizabeth had incidents and where they did things, and she's put together this smashing trail, really. She's made this wonderful map which shows you where to walk and is full of information about each of the places. That's absolutely fantastic piece of work done by that wonderful woman. I'm going to hand over to Heather now, and she's going to talk about 4 of the sites. So over to the wonderful Heather Watson. Thank you.
Albion Mill stood on Havana Street, just 5 minutes' walk from the Elmys' home on Buxton Road. It was one of 3 mills run by Ben. His mills manufactured crepe silk. An Albion mill housed 26 looms, as well as having a fully equipped maintenance department and office space. The mill property also included a house with garden, greenhouse, coach house and stabling. The house has since been demolished and the site is now the car park. The roadside frontage has been mainly rebuilt and is mostly modern. But if one looks at the buildings to the rear, it is plain by the brickwork that these buildings are older and may be the only remaining original parts of Ben's Albion Mill. While Ben had this mill, he allowed the premises to be used for meetings. A public meeting on the subject of Home Rule for Ireland in support of Mr. Brocklehurst, Liberal MP for Macclesfield, was held here in 1886 and chaired by Ben, with Elizabeth being one of the speakers. Also, the Primrose League held meetings here. The League was a Conservative organisation founded in 1883. It was the first political body to give women the same status as men within the organisation. It was used to encourage female supporters, as until women were allowed the vote, they could not be full members of the Conservative Party. As the textile industry was hit by the Free Trade Agreement, most mills in Congleton were struggling, and Ben sold the contents of the mill and Albion Mill itself in 1890. All that is left at the site of Eaton Mill is a car park. In the 1880s, when Ben Elmy's company occupied this mill, it would have stood 4 stories high and been able to access power from a water wheel on the River Dane, which runs alongside the site. It may be that Ben ran all his businesses from an office in Eaton Mill, as he often used this mill as his correspondence address. In one of the only photographs found of this area, one may see Eaton Mill on the left of the picture, with the clouds showing dimly in the background. In 1886, Eaton Mill suffered a fire. Ben used the local press to thank people who had helped to contain the damage. But due to the contemporary economical circumstances, the business never fully recovered. In 1890, the mill and its surrounding property were put up for auction. The Congleton Cooperative Society had premises on both sides of Mill Street. On the west side was a 3-storey building with shops and offices below and a public lecture room and reading room on the top floor. Here in December 1893, Elizabeth gave a talk on Alfred Lord Tennyson to an audience of 350 to 400 people. Elizabeth and Ben both used the lecture room here for talks, as the principles for encouraging education for everyone held by the cooperative movement matched their own beliefs. There was a library available which opened at hours convenient to working folk, and their son Frank donated books to this library. Due to its popularity, the library was moved across the road into the now derelict building. In later years, Frank became the librarian for the Cooperative Society Education Committee. This was not one of Ben's mills, but according to Lyndon Murgatroyd's research, was occupied by Harry Cook. In 1876, Annie Besant and Charles Bradlaugh, leaders of the British atheism movement, were on a lecture tour, and Ben Elmy invited them to talk at Congleton. He had tried to book the town hall, but was refused permission due to the provocative nature of the talks. Bradlaugh's title was "The Right to Think and the Right to Speak." The lecture was moved to Salford Mill. A disruptive crowd had gathered, and as Bradlaugh commenced speaking, stones were thrown at and through the windows from outside. Annie Besant was struck on the head. Afterwards, Ben, Elizabeth and their 2 guests had to walk the 1.5 miles to Buglaughton, enduring a shouting and mudslinging crowd. The protesters continued to make a noise outside the Elmys' home. The following evening, Annie Besant was to speak on progress only possible through heresy. At the mill, Bradlaugh ejected a heckler. The crowd outside again threw stones. This time, Elizabeth was hit and sustained a cut above her right eye. But the lecture was completed. Back at the house, Bradlaugh and Ben confronted the troublemakers and managed to disperse them.
Thank you very much for that, Heather. That is fascinating. We walk past these places every day and we don't know what's gone on there. Thank you. Dr. Maureen Wright, our wonderful patron and writer of Elizabeth's biography, sent me a quote last year that she had found in her research. It's from the WSPU's paper, Votes for Women, and it's dated the 9th of September 1910, and it really inspired me because it says this: "If the women of England ever realise what they owe to Mrs. Elmy, they will put up to her memory a national monument. And that's what we're hoping to do here in Congleton.
As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their trudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler tend the toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses, bread and roses, bread and roses.